Now, time for our 11:30 interview. It's with Josefina Rivera, who survived being held captive by one of America's most evil serial killers, Gary Heidnik. Her story is harrowing, shocking and brutal, and we do have to warn you, this is disturbing to listen to, so you might not want to hear it if you're of a nervous disposition. In 1986, Josefina was the first of 6 women to be captured and held prisoner by Heidnik in his basement. For 100 days, she was kept handcuffed and chained in a hole in the ground. She eventually escaped and helped free the other remaining victims. It's an extraordinary story, this, and you can hear it right now.
My parents left me when I was a month old, and some neighbors heard me crying, and the police came, and they took me and put me in foster care. I was in a loving foster care family. I'm still in the same family from the time I was 4 months old up until now, and they gave me everything I wanted, put me through school, and I had a wonderful childhood. And
But what actually happened then is that you fell off the rails, didn't you?
Yes, apparently. I always say that when, kids have everything when they're growing up, it's like sometimes it's just nothing else to do but to get into trouble because you're just bored, and sometimes life just takes you in a different direction.
It was the wrong crowd you'd fallen into?
It was a lot of drugs and drug dealings, and, it was basically the drugs that had me out on the street.
Yeah.
When I first met Heidnik, which wasn't a good thing, but, at the time it was quick money, and it just seemed like the right thing to do at the time and at that age.
How long had you been a prostitute, Josefina, before Heidnik met you?
Maybe 3 years.
Okay. And you had a rule, didn't you, which was that you would never go back to a man's house?
Right. And I never went back to anybody's house. But he was like 6 foot tall, so he like was hard for him to do stuff in the car. So, I made an exception.
So he said, too tall to do anything in the car, come back to my house. And your gut instinct was that you would break your rule for the first time ever.
Right, exactly.
What a bad decision that was.
Yes, it was, because I had been saying, like, the day before that, I said, I have a feeling something bad's going to happen to me. So I don't know what it is, but I just got a feeling. I don't know what it was, but I had an instinct. I didn't have it at the time when I met him, but I had it, I had, like, a feeling before it.
So what happened when you went back to his house? Did it go wrong straight away?
Well, when we went back to his house, it was, he had a normal house. Was nothing out of the ordinary, beside the fact that he had change around the bottom of his walls, like coins. In the kitchen, he had like pennies glued to the wall, and then in the dining room, he had nickels, dimes, and quarters. And then going up the steps, he had dollar bills and 5s and 10s and like wallpaper in the house. But outside of that, there was nothing different.
And you slept with him?
Right. And then after I got up to put my clothes on, he came up behind me and started choking me. And it was like a film projector flash flipping back, like a broken film projector, like different things that was going on in my life. And I started to struggle a little bit. And
what do you mean like a film projector? What do you mean?
Like when a film projector breaks and it kind of like flashes.
Yeah.
Flips, all right. So it was like just different things in my life was like flipping, flashing back in my mind.
While he was choking you? Well, that means you thought you were going to die.
Yeah, it was just things were just flashing. So I started struggling a little bit, and then he kind of let loose, and he had one hand cuffed on my hand, and then he said, put your other hand behind me. And I was like, started struggling. He's like, I'm going to start choking you again. So I just put my other hand behind me. And then he took me down into the basement where he had a hole dug inside the basement.
Can you describe the basement?
It was just a regular, wasn't a normal basement. It was a basement that sat underground. And so the windows weren't street level. He had a pinball machine down there, a freezer, and then he had a hole dug in the floor in the basement.
Was he saying anything to you when he threw you in there?
No, he just kept telling me to shut up. And he like forced me into this hole that was just too small. It was actually, I was like all bent up in there because I really couldn't. It was too small for me to be in there. there really wasn't enough room, so he kind of had to force me down into it.
And how many days did you stay there alone, Josephina?
I think it was at least, I know it had to be at least over 24 hours because he had the music and stuff blasting. And so I could hear it at different times. And I know a couple times he came down and grabbed me by my hair and pulled me back out, started beating me with this stick. And
just because he could, he just beat you.
Because I kept yelling. So he would just pull me up by my hair and just beat me with the stick and then just throw me back in there.
This was one of America's most evil serial killers, Gary Heidnik, who had kidnapped you, and now you were in his cellar. And
yes.
And other women were to join you. How soon did that happen?
It wasn't but a day or two. I remember I was in a hole, and I could hear a girl crying in the basement. And I could hear Gary saying to her, "Stop crying, Sandra. You know I'm not going to hurt you. You know me. You know I'm not going to hurt you." And then he took the bags of dirt off the board and took me out of the hole, and he's introducing us like we're best friends or something, you know what I mean? Like neighbors or something. Like, this is Sandra. So after that, the whole next month, me and Sandra was there by ourselves.
What on earth do you say to each other when you realize that you're in deep, deep trouble, that you're kidnapped by a monster and you're powerless?
I don't know. It's so unbelievable, and it's really still unbelievable to me today. I read the story. I've read the book. I was there, and it's still unbelievable to me. And it was really so difficult trying to deal with the situation and then try to deal with each individual girl that came down there, with different personalities and attitudes and different cultural backgrounds. And
so first it was Sandra, and then what was it? 4 other girls were to follow, right?
Right. It was Sandra, Lisa, Deborah Dudley, and Jacqueline Askins.
Were all 6 of you in that one place in the cellar?
At one point, yeah, but everybody couldn't sit down in a hole at one time. Sandra and Deborah both died, so they're just another overwhelming part of the whole story. Because Sandra had been there with me from the beginning.
How did she die?
She didn't want to eat. She had something wrong with her mouth, like her jaws or something, or deformed. So she didn't eat and chew her food the way we would just normally eat and chew our food. And I guess she was just tired of the whole mess, and she didn't want to eat. And she was depressed, and she didn't want to eat and do anything. So he had her on punishment, and he had her handcuffed to a raft in the basement ceiling, and he was trying to force her to eat. And he was shoving the food in her mouth, and she couldn't really chew it. And he kept hitting her. So then all of a sudden her whole body just fell over and collapsed. And he went upstairs and got his handcuff keys. He came back downstairs, and he just loosened the handcuffs, and she just crashed to the floor.
Dead. My goodness, when you see that amount of pure brutality right in front of you, I'm sure that stays with you and haunts you to this day.
Oh my God! So it was even so more incredible afterwards when he was cooking her body upstairs, and we knew he had to be doing that because the smell was the most awful smell that you would have ever smelled. I've never in life and since then have ever smelled anything that smelled like that. It was in food that he brought downstairs. It was in his clothing. It was all through the house. Even the neighbors were complaining about it.
So he was cooking her body?
Yes. Well, because he said, once I was free and he told me what he was doing and going on, he knew that everybody had already assumed that Sandra was with him, so he couldn't go out and dump her body, because then it would have just raised suspicions on him. Whereas Deborah Dudley, nobody knew that they were together, so he dumped her body out in the Pine Barrens.
And he fed Sandra's body to
Jacqueline and Deborah.
Did they know?
No. They know now.
Did you know at the time what he was doing?
No. I didn't know until at the end. During a couple of days, I was free.
My goodness.
Well, no, I wasn't really free, but once he took the shackles off.
You've mentioned a couple of times during this that you had that he liked you, and that
I didn't realize that he liked me as much as he did until after it was over with.
But he would still beat you, wouldn't he? Periodically beat you.
Yeah. I slept in handcuffs with my hands behind my back for, oh my God, for so long, because I had got away. And I screamed and hollered for help. Nobody would come and help me, and he ended up pulling me back in the basement before anybody did anything. And I was screaming and howling for like 20 minutes.
Outside the house or inside?
Yes, outside of the back of the house.
So you got out one day?
Right, but I couldn't get both shackles off my feet. I could only get one off my ankle.
My goodness. And he caught you, dragged you back in, and that's when he beat you again.
Yeah, and then he just kept me in handcuffs all the time. And then at nighttime, sometimes he would handcuff me to the pinball machine.
How do you survive psychologically and stop yourself completely falling apart when you're being raped, when you're being tortured, when you're shackled every day?
I don't know. It was just like a bad dream, you know. I would wake up and the shackles and stuff would still be there, and you just disconnect yourself from it. And I still disconnect myself from it because, as I said, I read stuff in here, you know, watch stuff that they put on TV and stuff, and it's still unbelievable to me, and I was there.
You were in that cellar for 4 months?
Yes, 100 days.
What's the worst thing you saw him do to either you or the other girls?
I think the screwdrivers in the ears, and all of our ears.
He did what?
He took screwdrivers and stabbed them in our ears to damage our eardrums so we wouldn't be able to hear him coming and going.
He would drive screwdrivers into your ears?
Right.
For what reason?
To damage our eardrums so we wouldn't be able to hear him coming and going in the house.
It's actually beyond belief, isn't it?
Yes.
The sheer evilness of that man. Did you ever get a sense that he regretted any of what he did after he did it?
You know, I kind of thought he did, but I just saw within the last few months, I saw a tape of him talking on to somebody, and he was like, I didn't care, I wanted everybody just to shut up. And I was like, my God, I could have just, then, you know, at that moment, in a second, I could have just strangled him.
You come up with a plan to make him believe that you were on his side. Now, what was that? I
don't know. I just, people have a way of just, leaving all their problems on me. He kind of vented, and I just basically...
What was he saying to you? Well, that's interesting. So what was inside his head? What did he think his problems were?
He said that he kept having children. He would meet somebody and he would have children, and the DHS would keep taking the kids away. But common sense would have said, well, stop picking mentally retarded people. You know what I'm saying? Right? Would be the common sense thing. But... so he figured this was his only way of doing it and being able to keep his kids together.
So you got a sense because he was confiding in you that you might be able to turn that to your advantage?
Well, at this point, I don't know how I ended up doing it, and I you know, through the grace of God, it's still amazing to me.
Because, of course, if you got that wrong and he realised what you were trying to do, you were dead too. By that stage, he'd killed Sandra, as you've explained. He had also killed Deborah Dudley, hadn't he?
Right, and I was with him when he dumped Deborah Dudley's body, too.
You were with him?
Yes.
So he allowed you outside with him?
Yes. But the girls were still back in the basement, so it was a matter of me trying to be somewhere where I was safe and he couldn't get back to me and he couldn't get back to the girls, because if he knew I was going to take off, then he was going to get rid of the girls. So. And
there were no opportunities when you were out with him to scream, to run over to someone?
Well, I could have, but then if he took off, he would have went back and killed the other girls.
Okay.
So at this point, after 4 months, I wasn't taking any chances of trying to do something, and I already tried to get away one time and nobody helped me, so... for me to try to go through that again, I wasn't going to even, try that.
How did you escape, Josephina?
He had put some water. He was doing punishment with the girls, and he had put some water inside of a hole in the basement. And he was taking electrical wires and putting them to their chains, just like shock them. And he would do it, then he would make me do it, and then he would do it, and then afterwards, he went upstairs, and Jacqueline lifted up the board and said, "Deborah's dead, Deborah's dead." And he came back downstairs, and I was like, "Harry," I said, Jackie says, "Deborah's dead." And he took Lisa and Jackie and unhandcuffed them from Deborah. And he was like, "Oh, good, now my basement can get back to order." So then after that, he made me write a letter saying that me and him had did it together. So I guess he figured that way I wouldn't take off and leave, And they never found the letter because that would have incriminated him too afterwards. I wasn't worrying about the letter because I knew once he took the chains off, I was like, okay, now I'm getting somewhere. But then the house was still locked from the inside. It was locked. He had inside and outside locks, so you needed a key for everything, and it was bars on all the windows, and so.
So how did you get out?
He took the chains off. Then he said we were going to go over to New Jersey to try to find a place. He started telling me everything he was doing. He had did. He was showing me that he had Sandra's body parts in the freezer, and the refrigerator, and an oven. And so he wanted me to go with him to dump Deborah Dudley's body over in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. And we went over there at night, and we went over, and he found this place, and we came back. And then he had put the girl body in the freezer. So he took her body out of the freezer, and he, pulled the plastic bag off her. And he said, look at her, look at her. I was like, I don't want to look at her. He's like, well, look at her. And so then he put her back in the bag, and he put her in the trunk of the car. And we drove back out to the Pine Barrens. And he pulled into this little marsh, it was just a little space within the woods, for him to turn off in. And I remember it was so dark out there, and I was like, oh my God. It was like he might have been going 3 minutes, but it seemed like an hour, and my heart was just pounding in my chest because I'm like, what if he decides to leave me out here? I could hear him taking the plastic off her body, and her body hitting the back of the bottom of the trunk, and I remember hearing his footsteps walking on the twigs and the leaves. And he came back and got in the car. He came back across the bridge to Philadelphia, ended up going to McDonald's and eating. And this McDonald's was a McDonald's that was open 24 hours a day. And he was sitting there like nothing ever happened. And he was like, you want something to eat? And I'm like, no, I don't want anything to eat. And I'm like, it's like all these people are in here. And I'm like, oh my God, we just dumped the girl's body over in the Pine Barrens. You know what I'm saying? But this wasn't facing him at all. So.
Well, of course, one of the defining features of a psychopath is that they feel no emotion. This was a serial killer who clearly had no emotion whatsoever. But
none, because I was sitting there my whole body is shaking. I'm like, oh my God, what are somebody's going to tell you when you grow up, this is what you'll be doing. This is not something that you would believe.
Was it on that night that you disappeared, that you escaped?
No, it was the day afterwards, I believe. He wanted to go out and get another girl, so I told him if he wanted to go out to get another girl, I wanted to go and see my family because my family lived in an area where he was picking the girls up at. I said, well, I can't take you with me because it's going to be like 1,000 questions and this, that, and the other. And I said, it shouldn't take me but like 20 minutes or so. And I said, you can just grab a cup of coffee. It was like a mini-mart gas station at the corner.
And so he trusted you enough by that stage to let you go to your family. Presumably as soon as you got to your family, you rang the police.
Well, I never got to my family. I went straight to the phone and called the police.
Did they believe you?
That's just a miss. No, they didn't. I had to tell them like 2 or 3 times, and then they finally sent the police out. And when they came out, they kept asking me to say, I said, if you don't hurry, he's going to end up going back because he's going to think I'm not coming back. So finally I showed them all the cuts on my legs from the muffler clamps. And they were like, oh, wait a minute, maybe something is going on here. And they said, where's he at again? I said, up at the gas station. So he said, if you stay here, we're going to send another police car down here with you. And the police officer that came, she was about to get off of work. And she was like, unbelievable. I don't got to get off of work. Now I got to stay late and go to sex crimes. I got to do this and that and the other. So I didn't say anything to her. I'm like, with all that's going on, that's the only thing you're concerned about. But anyway, they finally radioed her and said, well, could you bring her to the gas station? We want to make sure we got the right person. And they took me to the gas station, and they opened up the police doors, and I looked in, and I was like, yep, that's him.
And you were free, at last?
Free, yeah.
Some people didn't believe you and thought that you were a willing accomplice in this.
What happened was the girls' lawyers started telling them if they made me an accomplice, that they would get more share of the money that he had from his estate. And the district attorney, Charles Gallagher, went to them and said, do you know, if it wasn't for Josephina, you would have never even made it out of there. So, but the district attorney's office said, police never said anything about pressing charges against me for anything.
I found a lot of what has been described tonight obviously very distasteful. It's really horrific stuff. How do you handle living with the images and the thoughts in your mind?
That's really hard because you can't watch TV and you can't listen to, it's like there's always something that's constantly reminding you of something that happened there. It's something I try not to dwell on every day, but it's something I definitely will never forget.
Does it haunt you?
Yes, all the time.
Heidnik was executed in the end, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. He was executed. He was he got lethal injection. I think 2002 or 2000, somewhere right in there.
And was there any sense of relief when you knew he was off this planet?
No. And I sometimes still feel as though I'm still chained to Heidnik.
What do you mean?
Because it's a never-ending thing. It's like he's resting in peace, and this is something over 30 years now that I have to live with every day. So.
Just finally, Josephina, what your story, and you've written about your whole story in a book called Cellar Girl. It chronicles the story of your survival. But what your story does is it epitomizes the human capacity and the human ability to be evil.
Right. And you never just, it's like I said, I still look at this story and it's so amazing to me. It's like unbelievable, and I was there. But it's still unbelievable to me.
And the flip side is, of course, it epitomizes the human capacity to survive. You were in a hole in the ground, chained up, tortured, and you've lived to tell the story to this day.
Amen.
Thank you for talking to us, and thank you for sharing your story, Josephina.
Anytime, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Night-night.
All right, bye-bye.
First for breaking news and the best live sport.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The amazing story of Josephina Rivera and her 100 days held hostage and abused by one of America's most evil serial killers, Gary Heidnik. Hello there, it's midnight. This is Stephen Nolan on 5 Live. The front pages are in. We're going to talk about the papers with Edwina Curry and Patrick Strubwick in just a moment.